The rain tapped gently against the kitchen window, a soft rhythm that matched the slow beat of Margaret's heart. She stood by the sink, hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, and watched the world outside blur into streaks of grey and silver. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that made a house feel both peaceful and lonely at the same time. Margaret had always liked evenings like this, quiet, soft, full of small, almost invisible details, the steam rising from a cup of tea, the smell of rain hitting the earth, the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the background. It was a world of little comforts. Yet, even in the midst of these simple joys, there was a subtle ache she carried, a whisper of longing that she kept tucked away. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Ethan would be home soon. Her son had turned 17 last month, but lately, he had been quieter than usual. His laughter, once easy and bright, now seemed tucked behind a wall she didn't know how to reach. And while she tried not to worry, Margaret couldn't help but feel that something unspoken hovered in the spaces between them. Setting her tea down, she smoothed the front of her sweater and took a deep breath. The house smelled faintly of baked bread and lavender from the small bouquet on the counter. It was comfort, yes, but also a reminder of routines she sometimes clung to so tightly that she forgot to notice the small cracks in the life around her. Margaret moved to the window and watched the street lamps flicker to life, their amber glow reflecting off the wet pavement. A car passed slowly, headlights spilling across the raindrops, and for a moment, she imagined stories behind every passing figure. People with laughter, secrets, and dreams. It made her wonder. How many quiet dreams lived behind closed doors, just like hers? Ethan's arrival broke her reverie. The front door clicked softly, and she heard the shuffle of sneakers on the mat. She turned to see him standing there, a backpack slung over one shoulder, water droplets on his hair. For a moment he just looked at her, his expression unreadable, and Margaret felt that familiar tug of worry. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "Hey, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a smile, though her chest felt tight. "How was school?" Ethan shrugged, as though words were heavy tonight. "It was fine," he said. And that was all. Just fine. Margaret had heard that word countless times, but tonight it felt different. Laced with something unsaid, a tension she couldn't quite name. She watched him set his backpack down and shake off the rain. He moved with that quiet, careful rhythm that always made her feel protective. Not because he needed protection, but because she wanted to keep him close, to make sure the world never dimmed his light. Margaret thought about the years that had led to this moment. Quiet mornings with hot chocolate, long walks through the park, late-night stories that ended with laughter echoing down the hall. She remembered every detail, every word, every fleeting smile. And in her chest, a soft ache of nostalgia stirred. She wanted more of these moments, yet she feared they were slipping away without her noticing. Dinner preparations began almost instinctively. She chopped vegetables with deliberate slowness, each slice a meditation. The sound of the knife against the cutting board was comforting, grounding. She placed the pan on the stove, letting the gentle hiss of the oil fill the room. Every action was small, deliberate, and soothing, a rhythm of ordinary life that somehow held a kind of magic. Ethan lingered near the counter, watching her move. He never said much, but his presence was enough to make the house feel alive. Margaret felt an invisible thread connecting them. Fragile yet unbroken. A reminder that, even in silence, love persisted. As she set the table, she felt a flutter of something she hadn't acknowledged in a long time. Hope. A quiet, stubborn hope that tonight might be different. That maybe, just maybe, The walls between them could fall, and Ethan would speak what he had kept inside. The thought made her heart beat a little faster, a little lighter. Margaret poured water into glasses and carried them to the table. Ethan followed, still quiet, still thoughtful, but something in his eyes hinted at a story waiting to be told. She placed the glasses down and watched him carefully, her own emotions a mix of anticipation, love, and that quiet longing she had tucked away for so long. The rain outside softened, turning from a steady drum to gentle whispers. The kitchen felt warmer, brighter, as though the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when words would finally fill the silence. Margaret sat down, hands folded on her lap, heart open but steady. The evening stretched before them, ordinary yet pregnant with possibility. She didn't know what Ethan would say, that she felt, deep down, that this night, this quiet, unassuming night, might be the beginning of something she had longed for, though she hadn't dared to name it. And then, in the softest voice, Ethan finally spoke. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made the room still. Margaret's heart skipped a beat. She leaned forward slightly, eyes wide as if leaning closer could catch the secret he was about to share. And in that moment, the ordinary kitchen, the quiet rain, and the familiar sense of home became the stage for something extraordinary, a small, tender revelation that promised to change everything. Margaret's heart still thumped softly from Ethan's words, but her mind began to wander, carrying her back to a time long ago, when life had seemed simpler and yet quietly complicated in ways she had never fully understood. She remembered the first time she had met Daniel. It was a late spring afternoon, the kind when sunlight fell like golden silk through the branches of the trees. She had been walking through the small park near her apartment, carrying a sketchbook, tucked under her arm, filled with drawings she never shared with anyone. Daniel had been sitting on a bench, reading quietly, and when their eyes met, there had been a moment so fleeting, yet so certain, that she had remembered it years later with a bittersweet smile. It wasn't fireworks or dramatic decorations. It was something softer, a gentle recognition that two hearts could, somehow, notice each other even without words. She had smiled at him, a little shyly, and he had returned the gesture, simple and unassuming. That smile, quiet as it was, had lingered in her memory, a whisper of something beautiful waiting to bloom. Over the next weeks, their paths had crossed again and again. Each encounter was small, a shared bench in the park, a comment about the weather, laughter over a dropped sketchbook page. Yet in those tiny moments, a connection had formed, delicate but steady, like a candle flickering in a calm night. Margaret often thought back to the way Daniel's eyes crinkled when he laughed, or how he listened as if every word she spoke mattered more than anything else in the world. Life, however, had a way of testing patience and timing. Daniel had moved, for work, leaving the city before their bond could grow beyond casual familiarity. Margaret had watched him leave, feeling a hollow ache in her chest, but also a quiet hope that someday their paths might cross again. She had walked the park alone afterward, sketchbook clutched to her chest, drawing trees and benches, imagining moments they might have shared. She remembered the way her mother had once told her that hearts have a memory of their own. Margaret had not fully understood it at the time, but now she did. Every glance, every smile, every small gesture of kindness stayed tucked inside, quietly, shaping the way she felt about the world and the people in it. The past was never gone. It echoed softly in the spaces between now and then, like a melody she could almost remember but not quite touch. Her mind drifted to evenings spent writing in journals she had hidden under her bed. Each entry was filled with gentle observations: how Daniel had once helped a stray dog, how a shared coffee in a crowded cafe had made her heart lift unexpectedly. She realized now that love often grew in these quiet, unremarkable spaces, in the stillness between ordinary days. It wasn't loud or obvious, it was persistent, patient, waiting for the right moment to be recognized. Margaret's thoughts then wandered to Ethan as a small boy, full of wonder and curiosity, always asking questions she sometimes didn't know how to answer. Even then, she had felt that same quiet longing, the desire to connect deeply, to be understood, to share something meaningful that might last a lifetime. She had tried to teach him the small joys, how to notice the first buds of spring, the soft hum of a winter morning, the way light could make ordinary things feel extraordinary. The memories of her past made her realize something important. Life had a rhythm all its own. People came and went, circumstances changed, and yet the heart's quiet truths lingered. They lingered in the way she looked at Daniel now, the way she had loved Ethan from the moment he was born, and in the way she quietly hoped for moments of genuine connection, however fleeting they might seem. Margaret's gaze fell to the kitchen table, and she thought of the life she had built, the small, tender routines, the shared meals, the laughter echoing down hallways. She remembered the stories she and Daniel had told each other when Ethan was asleep, the plans they had whispered in the quiet of the night. Even when life had pulled them in different directions, those memories had stayed, like soft lights guiding her through the ordinary days. She realized that nostalgia was not just a longing for what had been. It was a reminder of what could still exist if hearts remained open. That understanding wrapped around her softly, like a comforting shawl, filling her with a gentle warmth that made the present moment, sitting with Ethan at the kitchen table, feel even more precious. The rain outside had softened to a drizzle, each drop a tiny echo of the memories she carried. Margaret felt a quiet anticipation in her chest, the kind that comes when you know that past and present are about to meet, when the moments you've held close may finally have a chance to bloom into something new. Ethan sat across from her, quiet but attentive, and she realized that he, too, was shaped by moments both big and small, by connections made and lost, by the past that still whispered in his heart. And in that realization, Margaret felt the room grow warmer, the ordinary evening charged with a gentle promise that words, when finally spoken, could bridge the spaces time and distance had created. And just as she opened her lips to speak, Ethan's gaze met hers, steady and filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time. A quiet courage, a willingness to share what had been hidden for too long. The kitchen seemed to hold its breath once more, waiting for the story that was about to unfold. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, painting soft golden stripes across the wooden floor. Margaret had finished clearing the dishes from breakfast when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. The neighborhood was quiet. The week had been routine. Curious, she wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door. Standing, there was a familiar face she hadn't seen in years. Daniel, or rather, Daniel's older brother, Michael, tall, kind-eyed, and holding a box of books he had promised to deliver months ago. Their families had once been close, sharing small holidays and quiet afternoons. But life had drifted them apart, and now, seeing him in her doorway stirred a flutter of memory Margaret hadn't realized she still carried. "Margaret," Michael said softly, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I thought I'd drop these off. You weren't expecting me, I guess." Margaret smiled, a little shyly, remembering the old days when their visits had always been filled with laughter and quiet conversations. "It's been a long time," she replied, taking the box. "Come in. You can set them on the counter." He stepped inside, the familiar scent of rain clinging to his jacket. For a moment they just looked at each other, the room holding its breath. Something unspoken lingered between them, the kind of familiarity that felt both comforting and slightly strange. Like stepping into a room you had once loved but had forgotten existed. Ethan wandered into the kitchen, curious about the unexpected visitor. "Hey, Michael," he said politely, a small smile tugging at his lips. Margaret watched him closely. He had grown. Yes, but there was still that quiet, observant nature. The way he noticed more than he let on. Michael nodded toward Ethan. "Hey, champ. I brought a few books I thought you might like. Stories about adventure, history, and a little mystery." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Thanks. That's really thoughtful." He accepted the box and opened it carefully, scanning the neatly stacked titles. Margaret felt warmth in her chest. Small moments like this, simple gestures, shared smiles, carried more meaning than grand declarations ever could. Margaret moved back toward the sink, pretending to busy herself with drying dishes. But she couldn't ignore the conversation unfolding behind her. Michael spoke softly, recounting memories of long-forgotten summer evenings, the smell of barbecues, the laughter of children running across the yard. Margaret found herself laughing at times, the sound light and easy, as if the years of distance had not existed. For a brief moment, she felt the gentle pull of nostalgia, the way old emotions quietly reawakened. She remembered the first time she had shared stories with Michael, the small confessions, the quiet encouragement he had given her dreams. And now, here he was again, standing in her kitchen, bringing back the comfort of those shared moments. Ethan watched them, his curiosity shifting to quiet understanding. He had always sensed the invisible threads connecting people, the way past experiences shaped present feelings. And now, he seemed to understand that some connections never truly disappeared. They simply waited for the right moment to resurface. Margaret realized how much she had missed these conversations, not just the words, but the ease of simply being understood. She felt a quiet gratitude for the gentle reappearance of someone who had once mattered so much, and for the opportunity to see him through the lens of the present. With its calm, quiet warmth, Michael hesitated, as if unsure whether to stay longer or leave. His eyes met Margaret's, and in that glance, she sensed a shared acknowledgement of years past, of unspoken memories, of mutual respect that had quietly endured. Words were unnecessary. The simple act of looking, of noticing, was enough to convey what neither had dared to say aloud. Ethan, sensing the moment, added softly, "Mum, I'm glad you came by. It's nice to see people who care about us." Margaret smiled at her son, proud of his insight and empathy. She realized how these subtle interactions, gestures, words, eye contact, were the glue that connected hearts across time. Life moved fast and people drifted apart, but these moments reminded her that connection was never truly lost. The kitchen, once ordinary, now seemed infused with quiet significance. Sunlight highlighted the dust motes drifting lazily through the air, the sound of distant traffic, the gentle ticking of the clock, all ordinary, yet somehow touched with the weight of memory and the promise of gentle reconnection. Before leaving, Michael turned to Margaret with a small, sincere smile. "It was really good to see you again. And thank you for welcoming me back so easily." Margaret felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of gratitude and quiet joy. "I'm glad you came," she replied. "It's nice to remember what matters." He nodded and gave Ethan an encouraging look. "Keep reading, Ethan, and keep noticing the small things. They're often the most important." As the door closed behind him, Margaret felt the house settle back into its usual rhythm, but something inside her had shifted. The past had quietly returned, carrying with it warmth, understanding, and a reminder that meaningful connections were never truly gone. She moved to the table where Ethan had set the books, the weight of the moment lingering. The afternoon sunlight slanted across the pages, illuminating the titles. And Margaret felt the gentle stirrings of hope, of nostalgia, and of the quiet magic of human connection. And as she sat there, hands folded over the open pages, she realized something simple but profound. Life didn't always give second chances in dramatic ways. Sometimes it gave them in soft, unexpected moments. A knock at the door, a shared laugh, a glance that said everything without a single word. The kitchen was quiet again, bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. Margaret sat at the table, hands folded, her thoughts tracing the moments of the day, the gentle rain, Ethan's quiet courage, Michael's unexpected visit. There was a sense of stillness in the air, as if the house itself was waiting for something to unfold. Ethan had left to do homework in his room, leaving Margaret alone with her memories and the soft hum of the refrigerator. She leaned back, letting herself breathe, and thought about all the small moments that had led here. The quiet dinners, the gentle conversations, the years of laughter and hope tucked into ordinary days. They had built a foundation of love and understanding she had sometimes taken for granted. And then, as if the day had been holding its breath for this very moment, Daniel appeared in the doorway. His eyes were kind but carried a weight she recognized, the weight of unspoken truths, of emotions held too long. Margaret gestured for him to sit. "Margaret," he began softly, his voice steady but gentle. "There's something I need to say. Something I should have said years ago." She met his eyes, her heart tightening, sensing the vulnerability behind his calm words. "You can tell me anything," she said. Daniel took a deep breath. "I've always admired the way you care. How you notice the little things. The way you bring warmth to every space. I think I was too afraid to tell you how much it mattered to me. How much I still care." Margaret felt a lump in her throat, a quiet rush of emotion that was equal parts surprise, relief, and joy. She had always known that love could be patient, but hearing the words aloud carried a weight all their own. "Daniel," she whispered, I've always felt the same. Even when life got busy, even when we drifted apart, I've carried that with me." The room was filled with a gentle pause, a moment suspended in time. Outside, the sunlight slanted through the windows, catching the edges of dust motes like tiny sparks of gold. It was a perfect, ordinary moment made extraordinary simply by honesty and heart. Ethan appeared at the doorway, curiosity in his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. Margaret smiled, nodding. Double quotes, "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "Everything is okay." Ethan looked relieved, his shoulders relaxing, and returned to his homework, leaving them in a quiet peace that felt both familiar and new. Daniel reached across the table and took Margaret's hand. There was no rush, no dramatic gesture, just the calm, steady presence of someone who had waited, quietly, for the right moment to speak. Margaret felt the warmth of his hand, a simple but profound connection that reminded her of all the small gestures that had mattered over the years. A shared coffee, a gentle smile, the soft encouragement in difficult times. "I think," Daniel said quietly, "that life gives us these moments to remind us what really matters. Not the busy days, not the distractions, but the people who see us, who understand us, who stay with us through everything." Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. "Yes," she whispered. "That's what I've always believed. And I think it's why we're here now, talking like this." The house seemed to breathe with them, filled with the quiet music of understanding and forgiveness, of long-held feelings finally given a voice. The past, with all its memories and distance, had led them to this moment, and the present embraced it fully, softly, Tenderly they sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Hands still joined, hearts quietly aligned. Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the small moments, the memories, the people who had shaped her life. She realized that love and connection were not always loud or dramatic. Often, they were gentle, patient, and persistent, waiting for the right time to be acknowledged. Daniel smiled softly. I think we both needed this to speak the truth, to see that what we've carried all these years wasn't lost. It was just waiting. Margaret returned the smile, a quiet joy settling in her chest. Yes, waiting for the right moment. And now it's here. Outside, the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The kitchen, once ordinary, now felt infused with quiet magic, a space where words and hearts met, where unspoken emotions had found their voice. Margaret took a deep breath, letting the warmth and peace fill her completely. Life had its twists and turns, its small losses and rediscovered joys, but she understood now that every gentle moment mattered. Every smile, every conversation, every shared glance. They were all pieces of the story that made love and connection endure. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, and Margaret knew that the future didn't need to be anything grand or dramatic. It simply needed to be filled with honesty, care, and the quiet understanding that comes from truly seeing one another. And in that moment, Margaret felt a calm certainty, a soft hope, and a profound gratitude. Life had brought them back together, not with spectacle, but with quiet intention and heartfelt truth. And that, she realized, was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. As the day drew to a close, Margaret and Daniel sat together, hands clasped, hearts full, knowing that love could be patient, enduring, and gentle. And for Margaret, that was enough, more than enough. Because sometimes the most meaningful moments aren't the ones shouted aloud. They're the ones whispered between hearts, understood in silence, and felt deeply in the warmth of human connection.